My wife told me she wanted to stop taking child support from her ex because she felt bad for him. I looked at her and said, "Then maybe you should get a job." She cried, said I didn't appreciate her. But what she didn't realize was that from that moment, I stopped being her husband and started being her lesson. I'm 36, my wife is 34. We've been married for 3 years, together for almost 8. I can't have kids of my own, but my wife has 3 from her previous marriage, a 16-year-old son and 2 younger daughters. When I married her, I knew I wasn't just marrying a woman. I was marrying a family, and I was ready for that. When I met her, she had just gone through a divorce. She was living with her aunt in a small house on the edge of town. I still remember the first time I visited. A modest kitchen, the smell of spaghetti sauce, her youngest giggling somewhere in the hallway. She looked exhausted but peaceful, wearing a faded t-shirt, her hair tied up. There was something about her that felt honest. Maybe it was the way she talked about her struggles without bitterness. Maybe it was the quiet dignity in her eyes. I was a design engineer at the time, earning close to 6 figures, owned my own place, and had savings. I wasn't rich, but I was stable, careful with money, never in debt. When things got serious, I told her, "If you move in with me, I'll take care of everything. But you have to want stability, not escape." She agreed without hesitation. The early years were peaceful. I'd go to work, she'd stay home. The kids adjusted faster than I expected. They started calling me dad within months. I never tried to replace their father. I just showed up consistently, quietly. Before we got married, we sat down to talk about money. Her ex sends her home $200 a month in child support, which was part of their divorce agreement. I told her up front, if you want to stay home full-time, that money should go toward the kids, not us. She agreed. We built a simple, fair system. I paid for the big things: mortgage, cars, insurance, school fees, and the $200 covered daily expenses like food, clothes, and healthcare. It wasn't perfect, but it worked. We never fought about money. I trusted her. And in a way, I trusted the structure we built even more. It made sense. It was balanced. Then came her son's 16th birthday. I asked him what he wanted most. He laughed and said, "A BMW." I laughed back, "Sure, let's see what we can do." My wife thought I was joking. I wasn't. I found a used one in great shape for $21,000. It wasn't flashy, just reliable and clean. I didn't do it to show off. I did it because I wanted the kids to feel loved, to know they were worth something. When we gave him the keys, he hugged me so tight I thought my ribs might crack. My wife had tears in her eyes. For a brief moment I thought, this is what family feels like. Then her ex found out. He sent her a text. "If you can afford to buy a BMW, then I shouldn't be sending you a damn cent." I expected her to roll her eyes and ignore him. Instead, she said quietly, "I kind of feel bad for him. He's living in a dump, eating cheap takeout. Maybe he's not as bad as he used to be." I just stared at her. Not angry, just surprised. A few days later, she brought it up again at dinner. "Maybe we don't need his money anymore. You make enough. It just feels wrong taking it when he's struggling." I put my fork down. "You feel bad for him. What about me? You ever feel bad that I'm supporting 5 people on my own?" She frowned. "It's not about that. I just think—" "No," I cut in. "You're confusing empathy with stupidity." She went silent. The kids kept eating quietly. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. Something deep inside me just shifted, like a balance that had quietly tilted without warning. That night, when she went to bed early, I sat alone in the living room, staring at the family photo on the wall. 5 smiling faces, and for the first time I felt like one of them didn't really belong anymore. At first, I thought my wife's sympathy for her ex was just a passing emotion, a moment of misplaced guilt. But I was wrong. She brought it up again the next morning, then again that weekend. Every time her voice carried this strange tone, like she was trying to convince herself that she was doing something morally superior. She started saying things like, "He's living in that tiny studio with no furniture. I think he's finally paying for what he did. Or he's still their father, you know. Maybe he's just trying his best now." I didn't comment. I'd seen her ex. The guy wasn't paying for anything. He was simply lazy, irresponsible, and allergic to accountability. A man who walks away from his family doesn't suddenly find redemption in poverty. A week later, during dinner, she said it again, this time in front of the kids. I really think we should stop taking child support from him. You make good money, and I hate the idea of taking from someone who's struggling. I stared at her. Then I set my fork down slowly. You feel sorry for him. Do you feel sorry for me? I'm the one holding this family together. The kids went quiet. My wife froze. That's not what I meant. Then what did you mean? I asked. Because from where I'm sitting, it sounds like you want to reward a deadbeat for being pathetic. She flinched, looked down, and mumbled something about not wanting to fight. I didn't fight. I just said the money isn't for you. It's for your kids. Stop mixing guilt with morality. She didn't respond. But I could tell something in her face hardened that night. Pride, ego, whatever it was. And from there, everything started to unravel. A few days later, I came home early and found her sitting with her mother and her best friend in the kitchen. The conversation died the moment I walked in. They smiled too quickly, like kids caught stealing. When her mom excused herself to the backyard, I caught one sentence before the door closed. You shouldn't let a man make you feel like you owe him everything. I knew exactly what they'd been talking about, and for the first time in years I felt genuinely insulted. That evening, after they left, I asked my wife, "What did your mom mean by that?" She looked away, pretending to tidy the counter. She just thinks I should be more independent. She doesn't want me to feel trapped, I repeated. You live in a paid-off house, drive a nice car, raise your kids without worrying about bills, and you call that trapped? Her voice rose, brittle and trembling. You make everything about money. I just want to do the right thing. I didn't shout back. I just said no. You want to feel like a good person, even if it ruins the life of someone who actually is one. She stared at me, stunned. That was the first time I saw her look at me not as her husband, but as an adversary. 3 days later, she messaged her ex, "You don't have to send child support anymore. We'll be fine." And just like that, $200 a month disappeared from our household. He replied, "Thanks. I appreciate it. No shame, no gratitude, just relief." I didn't explode. I didn't even argue. I just stopped talking about it. But inside, something went cold. The next month, bills piled up a little faster. Groceries felt heavier on the card. She started making offhand comments like, "Thank God you're so stable, or I don't know how we'd manage." But her tone wasn't grateful. It was sarcastic, defensive. Then her mother came over again. She waited until I poured a glass of wine before saying, "You know, a woman who stays home is still contributing. Don't make her feel small just because you make the money." I smiled, polite and detached. "I've never made her feel small, ma'am. But if she chooses to give up a legal source of income out of pity, maybe she should replace it with a real one." My wife's face flushed. "You're unbelievable," she whispered. "You're right," I said calmly. "I believe in math." Silence. Her mother excused herself. My wife glared at me, tears forming but held back by anger. "You're the coldest man I've ever met." "And you," I said, "are the most emotionally reckless woman I've ever loved." We slept back to back that night. The next morning, the real humiliation came. Her youngest daughter walked into the kitchen holding a school form and asked, "Mom, can I have money for the class trip?" Without looking up, my wife said, very deliberately, very loudly, "Ask your stepdad. I don't have a job. I don't have any money." The room froze. All 3 kids turned toward me. She didn't look up. She just sipped her coffee, as if daring me to respond. I didn't take the bait. I reached into my wallet, pulled out a few bills, handed them to the kid and said, "Here you go. And someday when you have your own family, you'll learn the difference between pity and responsibility." My wife stood up, face red, and stormed off to the bedroom. The door slammed so hard the picture frames rattled. That night I lay awake, listening to the muffled sound of her crying through the wall. I didn't move. I didn't comfort her. I wasn't cruel. I was just done. But the worst part wasn't the silence. It was the look in the kids' eyes after that morning. The quiet confusion. The dawning realization that their mother had crossed a line they couldn't understand. Later that week, her son, the same kid I'd bought the BMW for, came to me while I was fixing something in the garage. He hesitated, then asked, "Dad, why is Mom acting like this?" I didn't know what to say, so I told him the truth, the simplest, most honest version I could. "Your mom is learning the difference between pride and self-destruction. Don't be angry at her, just learn from it." He nodded slowly, eyes heavier than a 16-year-old should be, and walked back inside. And that's when I knew something fundamental had shifted. Not just between me and my wife, but within the walls of our home. The balance that once held everything together was gone, and this time no apology could rebuild it. After that morning, when my wife humiliated me in front of the kids, something inside me didn't just snap. It shut off completely. Not rage, not heartbreak, just silence. The kind of silence that doesn't scream or punish. It simply stops feeding energy into something broken. I kept doing what I'd always done. I woke up early, made coffee, went to work, paid the bills, came home on time. But I stopped explaining. I stopped asking. And I stopped putting money into our joint account. I didn't hide it. I just didn't mention it. When she realized the account was short, she texted me, "Did you forget to transfer the usual amount this week?" I replied, "No, I just wanted you to see what it feels like when $200 disappears for no logical reason." That was it. No follow-up, no apology. Just the truth, stripped of warmth left to stand on its own. That night she sat at the kitchen table staring at a piece of paper. It was a part-time job application for a local grocery store. When I walked past, she said quietly, "I'm thinking about applying. Maybe it's time I contributed again." I nodded. That's fair, nothing more. For the first time in a long time, she seemed unsure of herself, like a student facing a test she'd never studied for. A few days later, she went for the interview. When she came home, her face was pale. They said, "I've been out of work too long. I don't have the skills anymore." I didn't say "I told you so." I just said, "Then you start small. Everyone starts somewhere." She looked at me, searching for comfort, maybe even forgiveness, but I didn't offer either. You can't comfort someone out of consequences. That night she sat beside me on the couch, tentative and quiet. "Are you mad at me?" "No," I said. "I'm disappointed. Not because of the money, because you sided with guilt instead of logic. You tried to do the moral thing, but it ended up being the lazy one." She didn't argue. She cried quietly, shoulders shaking. And I didn't reach out to touch her. Not because I hated her, but because I wanted the lesson to land. The days that followed were eerily calm. We spoke less. We moved around each other like polite strangers. I paid the utilities directly, covered the kids' needs, and tracked expenses with mathematical precision. At one point, I even made a spreadsheet, 2 columns, household costs covered by me and household costs covered by her, if any. I printed it and taped it to the fridge. I didn't write a single comment on it. Numbers don't need commentary. She didn't tear it down. She didn't even ask why. She just stood there reading it for a long time, her eyes shifting from the left column, full, to the right, blank. That blank space said everything words couldn't. A week later she asked, "Do you still see me as your wife?" I looked at her, not unkindly but directly. "I see you as someone I used to understand. Now I'm trying to understand you again." She cried again, but softer this time. It wasn't anger anymore. It was something closer to realization. A few weeks later, she found a part-time job at a small flower shop downtown. 20 hours a week, barely minimum wage. But she took it. And when she came home after her first paycheck, smelling faintly of lilies and tiredness, she handed me a small envelope with $200 inside. "I want to contribute. For the kids." I looked at her, nodded once, and said, "That's the right way to think." I didn't smile. But inside, a quiet part of me exhaled for the first time in months. The kids noticed the change too. The atmosphere in the house shifted, not back to what it was before, but into something new, structured, controlled, almost balanced again. Her son, the one with the BMW, started helping around the house more. One night, while fixing something in the garage with me, he said, "Mom's different lately. Quieter, more real." I just nodded. He didn't need to know that his mother's quiet came from finally hearing the echo of her own mistakes. Then, one evening, she was balancing the checkbook at the kitchen table when she muttered under her breath, "If we still had that $200, this would be so much easier." I looked up from my laptop. She froze, realizing what she'd just said. Our eyes met across the table, and without me saying a word, she whispered, "You were right." That was the moment I knew the storm had passed. Not because she said it, but because she meant it. Here's what I learned through all of it. Silence, when paired with logic, isn't a punishment. It's a mirror. And when you hold up a mirror long enough, people stop seeing you. They start seeing themselves. I didn't win an argument. I didn't prove a point. I just stopped participating in the nonsense. The funny thing is, that's what finally made her grow up. Not my lectures, not my reasoning, my absence. The quiet space where her own reflection became impossible to ignore. One night, as I was turning off the lights, she came up behind me and said, "I miss us." I turned around slowly. "I miss who we were before emotions replaced sense." She nodded, no tears this time. And for the first time in months, I believed her. It wasn't forgiveness. It wasn't reconciliation. It was understanding, cold, clean, and completely earned. After that night twice when my wife quietly said, "You were right," I didn't say anything back. There was no point. Apologies are easy. Discipline isn't. And what she needed wasn't forgiveness. It was clarity. Over the next few weeks, she began to change in ways that felt subtle but real. She still worked at the flower shop. She still came home smelling faintly of pollen and exhaustion. But there was a steadiness in her I hadn't seen before. She stopped talking about her ex completely. She stopped acting like she was some moral hero for choosing pity over reason. She started budgeting carefully, even keeping receipts in a little notebook. It wasn't dramatic, just quiet, consistent responsibility, and yet something between us had changed forever. We were no longer husband and wife in the old sense. We were partners in logistics, two people sharing a home, co-parenting, maintaining peace. But the warmth and the natural ease we once had was gone. I didn't miss it, to be honest. There's a kind of peace that only comes after you stop trying to fix someone. A few months later, one night while we were watching TV, she turned to me and asked, "Do you ever regret marrying me?" I took a sip of my drink before answering. "No, I regret thinking emotions could replace logic." She stared at me, nodded slowly, then said something I didn't expect. "I think I finally understand what you mean. I used to think you were heartless. But maybe you just don't let feelings make you stupid." It wasn't exactly a compliment, but it was the closest thing to understanding I'd heard from her in a long time. From that point on, we didn't argue. We didn't dig through the past. We just existed. She worked, I worked, the kids went to school, the bills got paid. The house was quiet and not cold, not hostile, just quiet in a way that felt earned. Even the kids seemed calmer. Her son started his first part-time job at a gas station, saying he wanted to pull his own weight. Her daughters stopped asking which parent would pay for what. They just asked, "What do we need to do?" That's when I realized something. My silence had taught them more than my words ever could. One evening she came home with a small bouquet and placed it on the dining table. I used my paycheck for this. Just wanted to say thank you for not giving up on me. I didn't say anything. Because truthfully, I hadn't done it for her. I'd done it for the sanity of this house. Still, I nodded. "If you really want to thank me, just keep doing what you're doing. That's all I ever wanted." She smiled faintly. And for a brief moment, the air felt lighter. Months passed. The flower shop job turned into something bigger. She started taking custom orders, then eventually opened a small online shop called Lily's Corner. I found out not from her, but from a client who'd ordered a bouquet through my wife's site. When I got home, I saw a small business card on the kitchen table. Lily's Corner, fresh flowers and handmade gifts. Her phone number underneath. I just stared at it for a while. I wasn't angry. I wasn't proud either, just reflective. She'd finally become the version of herself she wanted to be, independent, capable, and grounded. And in the process, she'd outgrown the version of me that used to save her. That night she came into the living room after putting the kids to bed. We sat in silence for a few minutes before she asked, "Do you still love me?" I thought about it. Then I said, "I respect you, and sometimes that's the most honest form of love there is." She nodded slowly, eyes glistening but no tears falling. "Thank you for not teaching me with anger." I looked at her, really looked at her, and realized she was no longer the same woman I married. And I wasn't the same man either. We'd both changed, just in opposite directions. A year later, her son got accepted into college. We took a family photo to celebrate. Everyone was smiling. In the picture, I'm smiling too, but just enough. Not because I'm happy, but because I'm at peace. We never divorced. We never rekindled what we lost. But our home became something functional, respectful and steady, built on mutual understanding instead of emotion. It wasn't a love story anymore. It was something quieter, something logical, something complete. And honestly, that was enough for me. If there's one thing I've learned from all this, it's that you can't argue someone into maturity. You can only let them feel the weight of their own choices. Silence handled right is a form of education. And logic, when it's patient, is the most merciful kind of revenge. I never yelled. I never punished. I just stopped protecting her from herself. And in doing so, both of us finally became adults. I didn't teach her with words. I taught her with truth. And truth, when cold enough, teaches faster than love ever could.